Hello friends, and welcome to the Hanged Man in the Moon. If this is your first time here, welcome. Thank you for coming. I'm pleased to meet you. If you've been here before, thank you for returning. I'm truly honored. Friends, if you are a returning visitor, you probably already know that this is my deep dive year into the Thoth system, and within that deep dive year, I'm doing a mini-series, an extended mini-series that I call Back to Basics, where I'm going back to a very small, for me, a very small 3-card spread with 2 oracle cards added into the mix. And that's how I roll. And so, for this Back to Basics spread, we're really focusing on individual cards and how they interact with each other, how the astrology interacts with each other if we do have that. I'm trying to bring in as much information around individual cards as I can, while showing you and offering you a diversity of interpretations of the Harris-Crowley deck. The deck created by Lady Frida Harris and Aleister Crowley called the Thoth deck. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And I've got a spread already laid out for us. But before we get into that, I'd like us to think about new projects, new creative actions. And when I say creative actions, I don't necessarily only mean making art, making music, making dance. When we create something new, it could be food, it could be a plan, it could be a project at work, it could be anything. But when we start something new, when we commit ourselves to that new thing, oftentimes something will stand in our way. And more often than not, the thing that is going to stand in our way is ourselves. Have you experienced that? Have you ever noticed that most of the time the thing that stops you from doing the thing that you want to do is yourself? I know that's true for me. And I think that though the title of this video is not going to be second guessing, still, that's something we want to avoid in this week's time period. Yeah? So I think the challenge, I think the thing we want to avoid is going to be, second guessing ourselves, right? You know what that means, and I'm sure you've probably experienced it for yourself. I know I have. So friends, let me show you the spread, and you'll see why I'm thinking about this. Hopefully we'll land on a title for the video as we go through it together. Are you all ready? Have you strapped yourselves in, friend? Because we're in for a bumpy ride. Here are the cards for this week's spread. So friends, before we actually start reading the spread, just in case you are new to this channel, you're new to this Back to Basics mini-series, extended mini-series, let me tell you what you just saw. Let me explain it to you. What you saw were 3 cards from a Thoth-based tarot, and that deck is mass market. It's readily available. It's called the Liberty, and I will put a link in the description box below for that deck. It's a kind of simplified, a little bit cartoonish, if you ask me, version of the Thoth deck. It's redrawn, it's recreated, but the ideas are the same. Yeah? And you'll notice that there are more figures in this version of the Thoth deck than there were in the Harris-Crowley deck. Yeah? And we'll get to that in a bit. And it's a positional spread, which means that each card is responding to a specific question or a specific prompt. Yeah? And the prompts for these 3 spots are, the first card was for the significance of the answer to the question, how can we live our lives more intentionally in the coming week? So, the first card is the significance or the significant response. The second card is the challenge, which could be positive or negative, something to strive for, something to reach for, or negatively something that is a potential blockage or a potential obstacle. Yeah? And then the third card is advice. And then there were 2 oracle cards below, right? They're from a wonderful deck called the Oracle of the Radiant Sun. There will be a link to that deck below. I love this deck, especially when working with zodiacally based tarot decks. For example, the Thoth deck. And I think I'll try to incorporate it when I pull out my other continental, just my continental tarot spread decks. Yes, because the Thoth deck is not a continental tarot deck by any means. So that's what I'm saying. So there we've got 2 oracle cards, and they'll give us advice, or sometimes they'll recapitulate the main idea of the spread. This time I think it's advice, but we'll see together. First, let's look at the 3 cards close up that were from the Thoth deck. Here they are. Just from looking at these 3 cards, they seem very meaningful and important, don't they? The way that they're laid out, and the order that they're laid out in. Yeah. From left to right, you got the Aeon card, which would be Judgment in a Smith-Waite or a TDM-based deck. Then we had the Nine of Swords, and then we had the Princess of Wands. Now, the princesses, if you don't know Thoth, are the cards that replace what would be the page or the valet in a Smith-Waite based deck or a Tarot de Marseille based deck, or a continental deck as well. So Thoth changed those to princesses, right? And it's a really interesting deck. It's a really interesting spread. Yeah? We start off with Aeon for the answer to the question of how can we live our lives more intentionally in the coming week. And this card is very, very similar. Not the same, but very, very similar to this card drawn by Lady Frida Harris. We see here what? We see Nut, the goddess Nut, the goddess of the night sky, arching over a god there, an Egyptian god, I think Horus. And then we see a vague outline, like a ghost image of the young Horus, the baby Horus there, implying that we go from the old days we're moving towards the new days, towards the new iteration of Horus. Now, and Aeon and this is a lovely card, I think. Aeon is associated with fire in the Harris-Crowley deck. And it is on the path from Hod to Malkut. Now, if you know the Tree of Light, the Tree of Life, not light, life, the Tree of Life, Hod is, from my perspective, would be here. Maybe it would be here for you, but it's in the lower left-hand side of the tree. And Hod can be read in several different ways. Yeah, for me, I read Hod in the sense of surrender. Other people read it in the sense of glory. Yet Netzach, which comes before Hod, is victory. So some people move from victory over obstacles into glory, but I move from victory over obstacles into its partner, surrender to the obstacle. And not surrender in the sense of I give up, I'm defeated, but I surrender to what is, and I flow with the course of my life path, with the course of my chosen direction, either around, over, through the obstacle. Rather than confronting the obstacle and facing it off and trying to defeat it and having victory in that way, I surrender to what is and find my way through. That's how I read Hod. So the Aeon card connects Hod, that surrender to what is, with Malkut, which is the manifestation. Which is interesting, right? So the Aeon card is associated with the Hebrew letter Shin. Can we see the Hebrew letter Shin on the card itself? Yes, it's here at the top, right? You can see the glyph for fire, and you can see the Hebrew letter Shin there at the top. It kind of looks like a W, right? And shin is associated with, or a symbol for, tooth or teeth, which, if you think of like a pit bull, maybe one of those dogs that grab on and never let go. Yeah. So we get the idea of steadfastness here, but steadfastness in faith. One who is careful with their actions. It's a Hebrew letter for strength, and the idea of the changeless one, the eternal one, which would be God, the divine, in the Hebrew context, right? Or it can stand for change for the good. And the letter shin is also associated with fire, which is interesting, right? So we have the alchemical association with fire for the card, but also shin is associated with fire. So we have all of that. We have that fortitude. We have that changes for the better or the changeless one. And because we're associating the Hebrew letter shin, we can also associate the rune laguz, which kind of looks like an arrow with half of its top broken off. Yeah? Laguz is the rune for lake or water, which is an interesting pairing for fire, right? Fire and water, directions on a spectrum. It's also the rune for energy and renewal and regeneration, which are very interesting pairings for the Aeon card, which is also called the judgment card, the rising call from the grave, the call to new life, regeneration, renewal. It's also the rune for dreams and fantasies, perhaps fantasies which could be both in the positive sense, things that I'm fantasizing about, as in things that I want to move towards, but also fantasies as in illusion and something that is not real is also possible here. It's the rune for the unknown or the hidden. When you think of deep waters, especially when we think of the high priestess, we often think of deep water, right? That unconscious symbol of depth of water. That's here for laguz as well, the unknown or the hidden. But it's not a blockage because we can still achieve our goals in laguz. So achieving goals, the mystical side of water. We have renewal, regeneration, all of that wonderful stuff with laguz, in addition to that strength that changes for the better, the steadfastness in faith of shin here. Perfect pairing, I think, for the Aeon card, or the Judgment card, or the Calling card. Calling card. That's something else entirely, right? So, the card for the calling. And in other decks, we usually see the angel blowing a trumpet, right? Calling the dead from the graves. But here, this card is, rather, instead of a calling, this is a final decision and with respect to our course of lives from past to present to future. Does that make sense? Yeah, it's that final decision to move in the direction that we have already begun on. Yeah, from the past to the present, where we are now, to continue going into the future. It's that final decision. It's that, yes, I am committing myself to this path, to the end. It's making every act in accordance with our target of our will. Now, my will, my course of intention, right? Living an intentional life. We place things out on our path of life, vibrationally, you could say, and we move with the powerful flow of intention, which is also an evolutionary movement, right? We become the people who experience the things that we want to have, that we want to experience. And so this card is that final decision with respect to, it's making every act in accordance with that target of our will. We make every act in accordance with the flow of our intention to that and those things that we have placed out there on the path of our experience. It's also where our actions are leading us, this card. So we want to double check our actions. Are our actions actually in accordance with that will that we have placed out there on the path or the river of our intention? We also want to double check our connections and our decisions. Is every action or decision brings about a new state of being. It's part of our evolutionary path with the flow of intention, right? So we want to double check, are we moving with the flow that we have already intended for ourselves, or are we starting to move off in a different direction? Now, remember, the intentional life, the powerful flow of intention, course corrects, moves with our decisions and our choices and our actions and when we change our mind about something, the course of our intention will course correct. So we want to check, are we still going in the direction we want to be going in? Or have we muddied the direction of our path of intention by performing actions which aren't in accordance with the way we want to be going, or by confusing ourselves? So we want to double check ourselves. Some people would say take an inventory, but double checking ourselves is not the same as second guessing ourselves. Now, this card is the card of making decisive actions, making decisions, not second guessing. Double checking, is this really the thing I want to do? And then make the decision and do it. Go there. Keep going. Does that make sense? And that's significant because of this next card in particular. The challenge. Now, oftentimes, the challenge, as I mentioned before, is a positive challenge. It's something that we want to move towards, to strive towards, to reach for. This time, it's more of the negative challenge. It's the obstacle, something that can stand in our way, and that is the Nine of Swords, which is titled Cruelty in the Harris-Crowley deck. Cruelty. And this is a very interesting card. This card is very similar in many ways to the Harris-Crowley deck down here at the bottom. Yeah? In the Harris-Crowley deck, we just see the swords, and they're beautifully drawn and the blood's dripping. It's just a powerful image. Here we get a simplified version of that down at the bottom. And at the top, we get these two figures, right? One of those two figures looks like it's sitting and playing a flute, and one of those two figures looks like a warrior with a spear raised. Yeah? So is that warrior on the verge of attacking the flute player? I don't know. Now, the card is associated with Mars in Gemini, and I think you can see that here at the top, right? At the top of these cards in this deck, the Liberty. Liber meaning book, not liberty, but liberty. We have Mars in Gemini. Now, for me, Mars is not naturally at home in Gemini. Whether we're talking about actual domiciles, or we're talking about complements, detriments, or exaltations or falls, Mars doesn't naturally belong in Gemini for me when associating astrology with tarot. However, what does a person who has Mars in Gemini do? How do they present themselves? Well, they're innovative. They're lively and creative people. They are courageous and good communicators. Yeah, they're good and courageous communicators. Does that make sense? Good communicator, courageous communicators. All positive things, right? But for this card, Crowley points towards the cruelty of Mars in Gemini. And it can be cruelty coming from someone else, or the potential for us to be cruel to others. Those are possible things here, and we don't want to do that, right? We might want to double check. Are the people around us really for us or against us? Yeah? Are they for us or against us? But often that cruelty is actually self-criticism. And I think that's the potential here. That's the actual challenge of this card, is that we could fall into self-criticism. When we do that inventory, when we do that double checking called for in the Aeon card, we could slip into not trusting ourselves, losing the teeth of that shin, Hebrew letter shin, that we had in the Aeon card, or those teeth could turn into something that bite us instead of latch on to the flow of our intention. Now, we could be torturing ourselves with doubt, denial, and other tricks of an exhausted mind. Because it's a little tiring doing the work of the Aeon card if we don't do self-care, if we don't take the time for self-care. We could be resisting a needed change of mind or perspective in this card as well. And our minds could be consuming themselves with, our minds could be consuming themselves and conclude that everything is despair. Yeah, our minds, we get so worked up in our minds with, is this right? Is that, can I do it? Is it possible? And we tire ourselves out mentally, and we just fall into despair. That's possible here too. So again, self-cruelty or poverty of thought. Maybe we're not feeding our minds well enough. And that could be a reason for self-criticism. It could be a reason for doubting our possibilities because we haven't done the work of feeding our intellects. And that's part of the work of living an intentional life as well. Allowing information to come in and processing it and growing from it and evolving. Maybe we haven't done the mental work of evolution that is called for to be able to accomplish the Aeon card. It's possible. So, interestingly, when this card comes up, Crowley suggests that we consult other cards around it to release ourselves from some kind of downward spiral. And one of the releases, I think, is in that Aeon card. We check ourselves, we double check, and we make a decision, and we latch onto it, and we go. And avoid the challenge of slipping into this, torturing ourselves and doubting ourselves and slipping into despair. Being cruel to our own potential. And the next card we have for the advice is a wonderful card. It's a beautiful card. It's very similar to the Harris-Crowley deck. That's a little bit easier to see in its simplified form. You can see the princess and her long braids, which there's an indication that the hair of the princess. Now you see the hair coming up here, coming up and like horns, that those shapes could actually be symbolic of the feather of Mott, which is interesting. I'm not really sure what to do with that. The Princess of Wands is Earth of Fire. And Crowley associates all of the court cards in his deck with I Ching. So the Princess of Wands is hexagram 27, which is a person omnivorous of passion, reckless in attaining gratification. So the hexagram 27 is passionate. It's moving towards attainment and gratification, but it's dangerous as well, right? And that's interesting because Crowley points to some danger in this card as well. Crowley points to radical transformation. And the question, what is fueling our fire? What is fueling the fire? And remember, fire is the association with the Aeon card, right? So this card is asking us, what is fueling that fire? What is fueling our decision making? What is fueling the path of our intention? And remember, fire eats earth, right? This is the earth of fire. Earth eats earth and creates energy. But fire also eats other things and creates earth. There's a reciprocal, a cyclical relationship between earth and fire. Both of them having the potential to feed each other. So what is the fuel for our fire? We want to release, and especially release our energy. Release our energy in a directed way, in a deliberate way, in a focused way, I believe. The Princess of Fire the Princess of Wands is brilliant, daring, and courageous. But we must be aware that what we're doing while our passion burns, because we could veer off into the bushes. Yeah, all of that energy could without discernment could move us off the path of our intention. We could get a bright spark of an idea here. And when we do, with this card, we have the ability to generate something novel out of it. We have that ability, we have that potential. And we want to be a little bit careful of hyperactivity. All of that energy could get us a little bit wild, right? Hyperactivity, hypermental activity. So that calls to mind Gemini, right? Which Mars in Gemini, that hyperactivity could lead to this, mental burnout, mental, exhaustion leading to despair. So we want to be careful of that. But if we use that energy, if we direct that energy with the decisions and decisiveness of the Aeon card, being discerning, making sure that we're on the course that we want to be on, that every action we're taking, every decision we're making is actually in alignment with what we have planned for ourselves. If we do that and we take advantage of this advice of the potential fire of the Princess of Wands, we'll be good. Avoiding self-criticism, avoiding second-guessing ourselves, avoiding causing mental burnout and mental exhaustion, which leads to our loss of power. Right? So friends, this is a really interesting and I think very clear message for this coming week. Now, we have 2 cards for advice from an oracle deck. I already showed you them briefly. Let me show you them once more, up close and personal. Here they are. The 2 cards from the oracle deck are interesting on several levels. On the left, you saw we had the card for romance, and on the right, we had a card for defense. Interesting. They seem to be in conflict with each other, right? And in a sense, they might be, but they're in conflict in the sense of the male and female aspect of a heteronormative relationship might be. Yeah? Why do I say that? Well, let's look at the cards. The first one is romance. And here it is. You can see this couple. A happy, devoted young couple is how they're described. Yeah? They're associated with love, beauty, art, and romance. And the title of the card is Romance. And you can see that this card is associated with Venus in Taurus, a perfect association. Yeah, Taurus is the domicile, one of the domiciles of Venus. Yeah, Taurus and Libra are domiciles of Venus, especially for me. And Venus, beauty, unions, joining, love. Taurus, enjoying the material, going at their own pace, enjoying the sensual nature of being in a body in this beautiful physical universe. Now, the romance is not limited to that romance between two human beings. It's also the romance of life. Yeah? Romancing our lives, falling in love with life, falling in love with the world, falling in love with the universe, falling in love with ourselves. Now, all of that, we can romance not only one, or if you're polyamorous, 2, 3, or 4 other people. We can romance our offices, our homes, right? That's a wonderful thing. So, this card points to all of those, but also to romantic partnerships, right? So, this card points to the beautiful, the pleasurable things in life. Lasting affections. Not temporary, wham bam, thank you, Mr. Ma'am, whatever. But lasting affections between people. And it doesn't have to be only sexual romantic relations. It could be loving relations between family members, between friends, platonic romances. Yeah? And it's the ability in the physical, sensual contact between ourselves and the other. It could also be hands-on arts. Yeah, Taurans like that too, right? The hands-on, the manipulative arts, where we do stuff with brushes and clay, rather than performative arts like dance and theater, which is the area that I was, not dance so much, but theater, that I was more involved in. But the hands-on manipulative arts, right? Because we have Taurus here, this is a card of good money makers. So if we make art, maybe we'll be able to sell it or get some kind of remuneration from it. And this is a card of everything being pleasurable, even on the horizon with some earning. Yeah, there's some pleasure that's on the horizon. And that pleasure can also be financially beneficial for us. That all sounds wonderful, right? So remember those 3 cards at the top, where we're we're taking decisive action, we're moving with our intention, we're checking the decisions we're making, the actions we're performing, and we're going in the direction of our intention. We're avoiding second guessing ourselves and being cruel to ourselves and planting doubt within ourselves. We're being careful of mental exhaustion, and we're taking advantage of our fire, our energy, our power to create. And here we go, creation, right here, creating things, hands-on arts. And those hands-on arts might not be limited to things like the things I mentioned, painting, sculpture. It could be the hands-on arts of food, the hands-on arts of creating a project of some sort, a project at work, and taking pleasure in that, and falling in love with that project that we are working on, with the art we're creating, and with the people we're working with. And all of that could bring financial reward, which would be wonderful, right? Not that that's the point, but having the reward is a wonderful plus, bonus. But the real pleasure should not be the reward we're going to be getting, but rather the performing of the work, the doing of it, the romance of it, the romance of our relationships, and the romance of our creation. The creation that we perform with our bodies. And maybe limiting or excluding performative arts like theater and dance from this is an unnecessary distinction. Maybe that was from the guidebook, but maybe that's unnecessary. Maybe any part of our lives that we flow our creativity into can be part of that. Because everything that we do is going to happen through these wonderful bodies that we are co-creating, right? And so the next card is this one, which is Mars in Taurus. Did you notice something? Yeah? We have two Taurus cards, right? We have Venus in Taurus and we have Mars in Taurus. This card is entitled Defense. Now, Venus and Mars are planetary partners, right? The goddess of love, the god of war, which is Grecian. Interestingly, Venus's predecessors, or the earlier iterations of what we now think of as Venus, moving back into Ishtar and other pre-Grecian Roman cultures. Yeah, the Venus Aphrodite goddess has moved through the eons into modern times and has metamorphosed through those times. And in the past, she was, the goddess of love, but also the goddess of war, way in the way back, yeah? So, that's also an interesting thing. Now that we've got, the girl is the love and the beauty, and the boy is the war and the battle. In the past, that was all the girl. So, here we have the partners, Venus and Mars in Taurus, in the same domicile. So Venus is really happy, is really comfortable in Taurus. Mars, not so much. It's not like this is, he is being pushed out of the sign, or he really isn't, he has no place in the sign. But rather, he's gone over to his girlfriend's house and is spending the night. He doesn't have his stuff with him. He has to figure out how to manipulate and find space within his girlfriend's house. I mean, that's one way to visualize it. So Mars is here. He's got a place here, but it's not, he doesn't have all his stuff, and he's got to figure out how to work around what is there in his girlfriend's place. Mars has to work out how to be in Venus's home. And on this card, we've got some very interesting things here. It's called Defense. We've got 3 mounted warriors down at the bottom in a defensive stance, right? On the coin, that's supposed to be a Tauran image on the coin. Where's the coin up here? On this side, the coin. And you'll also notice that there are swords up here, 6 swords. Now, those swords are not there to use. They are there to be impressive. Again, that Tauran image, right? That Tauran image of beautiful environment, impressive, making impressive environments and beauty with what we have. So the defense card points to, so we have actual defense and we have the show of defense. And I think with this card being here in Venus's house, with Venus right next to him, this is more pointing towards the show of defense. And so, still, we may have to defend something we value, but we may be making a show of defense. We might be blustering when it's not necessary. Now, you go into your partner's home and you, where is this? Why is this? You're feeling a little defensive. We make a show of it, but maybe that's not what we want to do. There are also romantic aspects indicated in this card, which is interesting. That threw me for a loop. So, what do we want to do? We want to see the potential in ordinary things in this card. And we want to be able to transform them with slow but continued encouragement. Transform things into objects of value, which I kind of hinted at in the discussion of this card, right? Profitable actions are indicated as well as increasing value. So we got, again, profit, benefit coming our way as a great potential. If we don't hold it off by getting defensive, yeah? I have value. I am worthy. What I do is worthy and valuable is not an open stance, right? It's a defensive stance. It's trying to fend off criticism. Remember criticism from the Nine of Swords, right? We want to be careful of that. Instead, we want to put our attention at using the resources that are available to us to create the new, to create the artistic, to create the valuable. And to romance that action, to love that action. And interestingly, so I don't think that this is the point of the spread, but romance could be in the air in this coming week for us too. So just something to keep in the back of the mind. But that's not, I don't think, the focus of this time, but rather romancing our lives and romancing our creations. And loving the value of what we're doing rather than defensively. This is valuable. I am worthy. This is valuable. I am worthy. This is love. I love what I am doing, and my love infuses everything that I'm creating. That might be the title. That, I think, is the title. Love infuses. I think that's where we're going. Yeah? Love infuses. And still we do the work, right? We do the work of checking what we're doing, checking the actions we're taking. We're being clear. We're making sure we're not burning ourselves out. And part of that burnout could be that defensive potential in this card here with Mars in Taurus. Remember, we had Mars in Gemini in that defensive card. Here we have Mars in Taurus. That Martian defensiveness and aggressiveness is something we want to be careful of. We want to move in the direction of fire, passion, and love, and loving what we do, and loving what we are creating, and loving the people we're creating with. And yeah, maybe somebody out there might be, might have a cruel intent, and we have the absolute possibility of slipping right by that person. Just like I mentioned, Hod, where we slip by those obstacles by surrendering to what is and of finding the path through without having to absorb or take a hit from that, right? We move like lava because it's fire and water, right? Yeah, we're moving like water, but we are fire. We move through like lava, past whatever obstacle of potential cruelty is out there, not giving it any mind. Not absorbing it, not taking it on, I should say. Does that make sense? I hope it does. In love. Infused with love. I'm still working on it. Maybe, I think infused with love is still the way I'm going to go. So friends, what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Do you have another way of reading these cards? I'd love to hear from you. And friends, thank you. Thank you so much for hitting that thumbs up button and subscribing to the channel. The numbers of people subscribing to the channel grow all the time, and I'm deeply appreciative of all of you. Thank you very much. And I'm deeply appreciative for all of you because you are helping other people. You're helping this channel get in front of the eyes of other people with every subscription and every thumbs up that you hit. And if you want these decks that I mentioned, links will be in the description box below. I don't get any remuneration if you hit those links or use those links. They're just there for your convenience. If you want a reading from me, my email address is below. thehangedmaninthemoon@gmail.com. We can get you a reading, however, by video, by text and photo, by voice recording and photo, anything is possible. So friends, thank you. Thank you very much. And now, as always, I wish you love, joy, well-being, and pure awareness. Thank you.